The Montana winter of 1885 descended like Judgment Day. Ethan Calloway stood motionless in knee-deep snow, watching the body twisting slowly in the current beneath the ice-rimmed edge of Timber Creek. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees since noon, and the dead man's exposed skin had already taken on a blue-white sheen. Ethan's breath clouded before him as he crouched at the water's edge, his weathered hands reaching to turn the corpse. Frozen eyes stared skyward. Young man, maybe 30, well-dressed despite the mud and water damage. Not a drifter. A bullet hole marked his chest, the blood around it frozen in crimson rivulets. Ethan checked the pockets methodically, finding only a sodden letter addressed to someone named Hannah and a train ticket to Chicago dated yesterday. Snowflakes began falling harder as Ethan straightened, scanning the tree line out of old habit. 3 years a widower had taught him that death rarely traveled alone. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. The town of Timber Creek lay 3 miles south. By morning, the evidence in the creek would be buried under ice and snow, as if it had never existed. Ethan tucked the letter inside his coat. Whatever business had brought this man to his end wasn't Ethan's concern, but the letter was. Someone should know what happened here. He mounted his horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding that had carried him through the war and back. The animal snorted, impatient in the cold. Ethan turned toward town rather than home. Night was coming, and with it, temperatures that would freeze a man solid by morning. Whatever he decided to do about the body in the creek, it would have to wait. The snow thickened as he rode, obscuring the trail. Timber Creek appeared through the white veil, a collection of buildings hunched against the gathering storm. Smoke from chimneys rose straight up in the still air. At the edge of town stood a small cabin apart from the others, its roof sagging dangerously under the weight of accumulated snow. Through gaps in the warped boards, Ethan could see flickering candlelight. He would have ridden past but for what he saw through the frost-rimmed window. A woman and 2 children huddled around a rough table, dividing what looked to be scraps from someone else's meal. The boy, perhaps 8 years old, pushed his meager portion toward his younger sister. Something tightened in Ethan's chest. 3 years of eating alone had left him well acquainted with the hollow sound of one plate, one cup. But children shouldn't know hunger. Not in a town where the church bell rang twice on Sundays and people nodded respectfully to each other on the street. He dismounted, boots crunching through fresh snow. Up close, the cabin looked even worse. The roof timbers bowed inward, patched in places with what looked like pieces of crate wood. No smoke came from the chimney despite the bitter cold. His knock startled them. The woman came to the door, thin fingers gripping the frame as if for support. Her face was drawn but dignified, eyes weary as she positioned herself between him and the children. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, removing his hat. The name came from what he'd heard around town. The widow whose husband had died under questionable circumstances. "Mr. Calloway?" Her voice revealed surprise that he would know her name. She waited, expectant but wary. Ethan looked past her to the children's hollow cheeks, to the nearly empty cupboard visible beyond, then up at the ceiling where snow drifted through gaps onto the dirt floor. With the temperature dropping to 20 below by midnight, this cabin would be a coffin by morning. "Get your things," Ethan said, his voice rough from disuse. "You're coming home with me. Winter's setting in proper, and this cabin won't hold." Hannah Whitaker's face showed the battle between pride and maternal desperation. Her daughter coughed softly behind her, and whatever argument she might have made died unspoken. "We have little to bring," she said finally, giving him a single tight nod. "Then it won't take long," Ethan replied, stepping inside to help. The boy stood protectively near his mother, watching Ethan with suspicion bred from hard experience. The girl, no more than 6, hid behind her mother's skirts, eyes large in her thin face. "William, Sarah," Hannah said quietly, "Mr. Calloway has offered us shelter from the storm. Gather your things." Ethan moved to help with a trunk in the corner. As he lifted it, Hannah spoke in a low voice behind him. "Why would you help us, Mr. Calloway? You know what they say about my husband in town." Ethan didn't look at her. "I don't put much stock in what people say." "And what do you put stock in?" "What I see with my own eyes." He nodded toward the children. "And I see 2 kids who won't survive another night in this place." As they loaded the trunk and a broken rocking chair onto his wagon, Hannah touched his arm. "The body in the creek. Was it a man about 30, dark hair, blue coat?" Ethan's hand froze on the rope he was tying. "You know him?" "My brother Daniel. He was coming to take us away from here." She looked at the children, making sure they couldn't hear. After Robert died, Daniel was all the family we had left. He wrote that he was coming to help us start over in Chicago. Ethan considered whether to tell her what he'd found, then reached inside his coat and handed her the sodden letter. I'm sorry. She took it without opening it, her face a mask of control that impressed him despite the circumstances. 3 years ago, when the doctor had told him about Margaret and the baby, Ethan had put his fist through the barn wall. The children don't know yet, Hannah said, and I'd prefer to keep it that way until we're somewhere safe. The blizzard worsened as they left town, wind driving the snow horizontal across the trail. Hannah sat beside Ethan on the wagon bench, her children huddled under buffalo robes in the back. Your husband, Ethan said, eyes fixed on the fading trail. Mining accident, they said. That's what they called it. Hannah pulled her threadbare coat tighter. A fire in the company warehouse. But Robert wasn't a miner. He was a surveyor for the railroad. Ethan nodded, understanding both what she said and didn't say. Timber Creek took care of its own, unless rumors started, unless someone fell from grace. And you lost your wife, she ventured after another mile passed in silence. 3 winters passed, childbirth. Each word fell like stone. Lost them both. The wagon lurched suddenly as something cracked beneath them. The right front wheel splintered as it dropped into a snow-covered washout. The wagon listed dangerously. Ethan jumped down, assessing the damage with a glance. Wheels gone. We're still 2 miles out. He looked at the rapidly disappearing trail, then at the darkening sky. And we walk from here. He lifted William from the wagon, wrapping the boy in one of the buffalo robes. Hannah gathered Sarah in similar fashion. The girl's face was flushed with cold, eyes drooping with exhaustion. Hold tight to my neck, boy, Ethan told William, settling him against his shoulder. We've got some ground to cover. They trudged through deepening snow, following the barely visible fence line marking Ethan's property. By the time his ranch house appeared through the swirling white, Hannah's legs were numb, her arms aching from carrying Sarah. The house stood solid against the storm. 2 stories of sturdy timber with a wide porch. Inside was clean but sparse. No decorations softened the practical furniture. No pictures hung on the walls. The hearth was cold, like no one had been home for days. But there was a horse outside that wasn't Ethan's. Stay here, he said, setting William down by the door. He drew the revolver from beneath his coat and pushed the door open. Judge Emmett Pierce sat in Ethan's chair by the cold fireplace, helping himself to Ethan's whiskey. His silver hair and beard were nearly trimmed, his clothes expensively tailored despite the frontier setting. At 65, he was the most powerful man in Timber Creek, owning the land the town was built on and serving as judge for the county. Calloway, Pierce said without rising, expected you back sooner. Who've you brought with you? Judge. Ethan didn't holster his weapon. You're in my house. And you're harboring the Whitaker woman. Pierce swirled the whiskey in his glass. Word travels fast, even in a storm. Ethan pushed the door wider, letting Hannah and the children enter. Mrs. Whitaker's cabin wouldn't survive the night. Neither would her children. Pierce smiled without warmth. Always the Good Samaritan. But you know what they say about her husband's dealings. About her part in it. I know what they say, Ethan replied, moving to light the fire. Not much of it worth repeating. Hannah busied the children with settling near the growing warmth, keeping her back to Pierce. But William stared at the judge with open hostility. The Wallace brothers are reconsidering their cattle contract with you, Pierce said, lowering his voice, though not enough to prevent Hannah from hearing. Tompkins, too. Is that so? Ethan stood straighter. Then they can take their business elsewhere. Pierce set down his glass and stood, towering despite his age. You're making a mistake, Calloway. This woman's husband stole from every investor in the Timber Creek Mining Company. Good men lost everything. Robert never stole anything, Hannah said, turning to face him. Her eyes widened as she saw the gold watch chain hanging from Pierce's vest. That watch, it's Robert's. His initials are engraved inside the cover. Pierce's hand moved to cover the watch. I purchased this legally at auction after your husband's debts were settled. Robert was never in debt. Hannah stepped closer, voice steady despite her trembling hands. And that watch was a gift from his father. He would never have sold it. Ethan moved between them. I think it's time you left, Judge. Pierce buttoned his coat with deliberate slowness. The Union Pacific line will be coming through these parts by spring. The planned route runs right through the middle of your ranch, Calloway. He put on his hat. Unless you stand on the right side of progress. Good night, Judge, Ethan said, opening the door to the storm. Pierce paused in the doorway. Think about what you're risking, Calloway, and for what? A woman whose husband tried to swindle the whole town. He looked at Hannah. You'd be wise to move on, Mrs. Whitaker. There's nothing for you here. After the door closed behind Pierce, Hannah turned to Ethan. I should go. I won't bring trouble to your door after you've shown us kindness. You're not going anywhere tonight, Ethan replied, stoking the fire higher. Storm's getting worse. That night, after the children fell asleep by the hearth, Hannah found Ethan sitting alone at his kitchen table, a small lamp burning low. He turned something in his fingers, a gold wedding band different from the one he wore. He looked up at her approach but didn't hide it. Margaret's, he offered quietly. I keep meaning to put it away. Hannah nodded, understanding the power of such objects. I still have Robert's pocket watch chain, the one that should have been with his watch. A simple confession, but it opened a door between them. Words came easier in the dim lamplight. How his wife died, bringing their son into the world, neither surviving the night. How her husband's death revealed supposed debts that left her destitute and whispered about. The town turned quickly, she said, tracing patterns on the wooden tabletop. Yesterday's neighbors become strangers when there's scandal attached. Small towns have long memories and short charity, Ethan replied. Hannah studied his face, realizing that this quiet, solitary man had just placed himself between her family and the town's judgment at considerable cost. Why would you risk your livelihood for strangers? Ethan was silent for a long moment. When I came back from the war, I had nothing. Margaret gave me a reason to build something. Her father gave me work and then this land. He looked around the kitchen. 4 walls don't make a home, Mrs. Whitaker. Hannah, she corrected softly. Hannah, he acknowledged with a nod. Get some sleep. Morning comes early here. The night deepened around Ethan's ranch as the house finally grew quiet. After ensuring Hannah and the children were settled, Ethan returned to sit alone by the fire, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows with a familiar cadence that always took him back to darker times. He stared into the flames, and suddenly it wasn't Montana in 1885 anymore, but the bitter January of 1863, outside Gettysburg. His regiment had been separated from the main Union forces during a reconnaissance mission when the blizzard hit. Their commanding officer, Captain Willard, had ridden for help, promising to return with supplies and reinforcements. He never came back. 23 men huddled in a makeshift camp as the temperature plummeted. By morning, 3 were dead from exposure. By the second night, they were down to 17. We wait, we die, Ethan had told Lieutenant Morris. They think we're already lost. Ethan had grown up hunting in Michigan winters. He knew how to read the snow, how to find shelter where none seemed possible, how to keep men alive when death pressed close. He'd led the survivors west, toward a ridge he'd scouted days earlier, where the trees would provide some shelter from the wind. James Sullivan had been his closest friend since they'd enlisted together. A wiry Irishman with a quick laugh and quicker temper. As they struggled through snowdrifts, Sullivan had fallen, his leg broken in a hidden crevice. Leave me, Calloway, he'd gasped, face gray with pain. Save the others. Instead, Ethan had fashioned a travois from pine branches and dragged Sullivan for miles. During their third night in the shelter of the ridge, with infection setting into Sullivan's leg, his friend had gripped Ethan's wrist with surprising strength. My Mary and the baby in Cleveland, Sullivan had whispered. You'll check on them, make sure they're all right. You'll check on them yourself, Ethan had replied, but they both knew the lie of it. Promise me, Ethan. I promise. Sullivan died before dawn. 14 men eventually reached Union lines, carried solely by Ethan's determination. They'd hailed him as a hero, but the medal they pinned on his chest meant nothing. When the war ended, Ethan had gone to Cleveland, only to discover that Mary Sullivan and her infant son had died from smallpox the previous winter. He'd stood at their graves, the failure of his promise a weight that never quite lifted from his shoulders. Now, watching the Montana storm, Ethan recognized the same weight settling in. Another family at risk, another promise, unspoken but binding nonetheless. He wouldn't fail this time. The floor creaked behind him, and he turned to see Hannah standing in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. The wind woke me, she said softly, though I suspect it's not what's keeping you awake. Old ghosts, Ethan replied, gesturing to the chair opposite his. They walk closer in weather like this. She sat, studying him. From the war? Among other places. He poked at the fire. We all carry something, I suppose. Yes, Hannah agreed, we do. She hesitated. Robert's watch bothers me. Pierce wearing it so openly. It's like he's flaunting what he did. Men like Pierce believe they're untouchable. That makes them careless. Ethan finally took a sip of his whiskey, and carelessness leaves evidence. Their conversation drifted into silence, but it was a comfortable one. Shared understanding required fewer words, Ethan had always found. Eventually, Hannah returned to bed, and Ethan was left alone with his thoughts in the howling wind. Days melted together, marked by routine rather than calendar. Ethan showed William how to feed the horses each morning, patiently demonstrating how to approach from the front. Speak softly. Offer the feed flat-palmed. The boy's small hands trembled with cold but remained determined. "My father had a mule," William told him one morning, his breath clouding. "Not horses." "Mules are smarter than horses," Ethan replied, surprising himself with the conversation. "Harder workers, too." William considered this. "Then why do you have horses?" "Sometimes we choose things for how they make us feel, not just what they can do." Ethan surprised himself again. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken so many words together. Before dawn the next day, Ethan shook William gently awake. The boy startled, then relaxed when he recognized Ethan in the dim light. "Get dressed," Ethan whispered. "Warm clothes, quiet now." Minutes later, they slipped out the back door into the blue-gray light of pre-dawn. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow. The temperature had risen slightly, making the morning almost bearable. "Are we feeding the horses again?" William asked, his breath clouding. "Something different today." Ethan led him toward the edge of the property where the land sloped down to a small creek, now frozen solid. "Your family needs meat for the winter. I'm going to show you how to set traps." William's eyes widened. "For rabbits?" Ethan nodded. "They'll be moving at first light, looking for food beneath the snow." For the next hour, he showed the boy how to identify rabbit trails in the fresh snow, explaining the difference between old tracks and new. He demonstrated how to build a simple wire snare, positioning it at just the right height. "Too high, they go under. Too low, they jump over," Ethan explained, his big hands working the wire with surprising delicacy. "Just right, and you'll have dinner." William watched intently, then tried to replicate Ethan's work with clumsy fingers. His first attempt collapsed immediately. The second was marginally better. By the third, his small face was set with determination that reminded Ethan painfully of Sullivan. "My father was teaching me to fish," William said suddenly, not looking up from his work. Before the fire, we only went once." Ethan continued working, sensing the boy needed the space of silence. "He promised we'd go again in the spring," William continued, voice tight. "To the big river." "We can do that," Ethan said simply, "when the ice breaks." William glanced up, surprised. "Really?" "A boy should know how to fish." They set 6 traps in total. As they worked on the last one, Ethan showed William how to maintain the wire, how to keep the snare mechanism clean. "Tools are only as good as the care you give them," Ethan explained. "Knife, rifle, fishing pole, doesn't matter. You take care of your tools, they take care of you." William nodded solemnly. "Like people." Ethan looked at the boy with new appreciation. Exactly like people. The next morning, they checked the traps together. 5 were empty, but the 6th held a plump snowshoe hare, its white fur almost invisible against the snow. William's face lit with a pride Ethan recognized from his own childhood. The first successful hunt, the primal satisfaction of providing. "You did well," Ethan said, surprising himself with the warmth in his voice. "Your mother will be pleased." That evening, as they ate Hannah's rabbit stew, William looked across the table at Ethan with something new in his eyes. "Thank you, Ethan," he said, using the man's first name for the first time. Hannah's eyes met Ethan's over the children's heads, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Inside, Hannah had established order in his long-neglected home. Meals appeared at regular times. The floors were swept, windows shone. Sarah followed her mother like a shadow, learning each task with solemn attention. One afternoon, Ethan found Hannah examining the broken spindles of her rocking chair. "I can fix that," he offered, running a hand along the damaged wood. "You're a carpenter?" she asked. "Just handy with tools." He carried the chair to his workshop attached to the barn. Sarah trailed after them, watching intently as he selected wood for new spindles. "My daddy made this chair," she said as he worked. Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. The first words he'd heard from her. "Can you make it remember him still?" Ethan paused, considering. "Yes," he said finally. "We'll keep the arms he carved, just replace what's broken." When supplies ran low, they made their first journey to town together. The children sat between them on the wagon bench, their presence a buffer against what waited in Timber Creek. Whispers followed them down the street, Women gathered in doorways, conversations stopping as they passed. Men nodded curtly to Ethan, but looked through Hannah as if she were invisible. At the general store, Frank Williams stepped from behind the counter, blocking their way. "Calloway," he said stiffly, "perhaps Mrs. Whitaker would be more comfortable waiting outside while you conduct your business." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You've known me 15 years, Frank." The words came quiet but firm. "Never known me to leave family waiting in the cold." The word family hung in the air between them. Frank hesitated, then stepped aside. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Ethan found Hannah at the kitchen table with Robert's journal open before her. "I'm trying to understand," she said. "Robert was so excited about this surveying job. Said Judge Pierce had personally selected him because of his attention to detail." Ethan pulled up a chair beside her. "Tell me about Timber Creek. How long have you lived here?" "5 years. We came when the mine was still operating." Hannah closed the journal. "The town was different then. Livelier, more hopeful." "And Pierce? He's been judge how long?" "He was already established when we arrived. Must be going on 15 years now." Hannah frowned. "The town was founded in '68 after silver was discovered. When the mine played out around '78, many left. Those who stayed turned to ranching." "And Pierce stayed," Ethan observed. "He owns half the valley," Hannah confirmed. "When the railroad announced they were planning a route through these parts last year, land values doubled overnight. Pierce had already bought up most of the struggling properties." "Convenient timing," Ethan mused. "Pierce represents the Union Pacific interests locally. The contract to bring the railroad through here is worth millions." Hannah's finger traced the edge of the journal. "Robert said they're paying nearly $20,000 per mile of track laid, plus land grants from the government. A lot of money at stake," Ethan said quietly. "And your husband found a problem with their plans." Hannah nodded. "In his final survey, he discovered that the proposed road crosses a section of land about 5 miles east that's unstable. Old mine workings underneath. He calculated that a fully loaded train could trigger a collapse. And he reported this to Pierce." "And to his supervisor at the railroad," Hannah confirmed. "The next day," her voice faltered. "The fire," Ethan finished. "The sheriff ruled it an accident. Said Robert must have knocked over a lamp." Ethan thought for a moment. "And the town believed it." "They believed what was convenient," Hannah said bitterly, "especially after rumors started about Robert embezzling from the railroad survey fund. Suddenly we were outcasts. No one would speak to us. The bank called in loans we didn't even know Robert had supposedly taken out." "Harding's bank." "Yes, Pierce's right hand." Hannah's fingers tightened on the journal. "Everything's connected. Pierce controls the town through Harding's money and Sheriff Tate's authority. The Homestead Act gives them legal cover to manipulate land ownership. Anyone who challenges them ends up like Robert," Ethan said grimly, "and your brother." That evening, returning to the ranch, Ethan noticed Hannah had reorganized his kitchen cupboards. The plates and cups he'd kept haphazardly were now neatly arranged, some of her own things integrated with his. He paused, studying the change, then left it unchanged. Something about their mingled possessions felt right. A week after their arrival, Robert Collins, Ethan's friend since boyhood, rode out to the ranch. They sat on the porch, passing a coffee cup between them as Robert delivered the town's verdict. "It's nothing personal against the woman," Robert insisted. "But folks have long memories. You're tying yourself to scandal." "They're just people fallen on hard times," Ethan said. "Maybe so, but your business is suffering. You're standing too." Robert leaned forward. "Send them on their way. Come spring, this will blow over." That night, doubt crept into Ethan's heart. Standing by the window, watching Hannah hang laundry in the yard, he wondered if he was doing her family a service or disservice by binding their fate to his. When she came inside, he couldn't meet her eyes directly. "Perhaps when spring comes," he said, voice strained, "you might find better prospects elsewhere." Her face showed the betrayal his words inflicted. She stood motionless in the doorway to the children's room, back straight despite the blow. "We've outstayed charity before," she said quietly. "We'll begin packing tomorrow." Before Ethan could respond, heavy pounding rattled the door. Hannah stepped back, instinctively moving toward the children. Ethan opened the door to find Daniel Harding, the town banker, standing on his porch with 2 other men. "Evening, Calloway," Harding said, snow dusting his expensive coat. "We need to talk business." Harding was Pierce's right hand, handling the financial side of the judge's many ventures. His presence here, after dark, was no coincidence. "It's late, Harding," Ethan replied, not inviting them inside. "Not too late to save your contracts." Harding's voice carried through the open door. The Wallace brothers, Tompkins, all willing to reconsider if certain situations are resolved. Hannah appeared at Ethan's shoulder. "Mr. Harding, I see you're still doing the judge's dirty work." Harding's face tightened. "Mrs. Whitaker, I've brought the papers regarding your husband's debts. The mining company's preparing to place liens on any property associated with you." "Those debts are settled," Ethan interrupted. Hannah's head snapped up, but Ethan reached into a drawer by the door, removing a folded document. "Paid them 2 days ago. Full amount." "You had no right," Hannah began, rising. "Not charity," he said firmly. "Investment." He placed another document beside the first. A deed with both their names. Partnership in the ranch. Equal shares. He looked directly at Harding. "Unless there's other business, Mr. Harding." The banker gathered his papers stiffly. "This changes nothing about how the town sees her." "Then the town needs spectacles." When they were alone, Hannah touched the deed with trembling fingers. "Why would you do this?" "Because a person needs solid ground to stand on," he answered. "And I need a partner more than hired help." Hannah studied his face, seeing truth there. "Not for myself," she said finally, "but for the home our children deserve." Her emphasis on "our" sealed something between them. But next morning, Sarah woke screaming from nightmares. "The bad men," she cried, clinging to her mother. "The bad men hurt Papa." Hannah tried to soothe her, but Sarah looked directly at Ethan with tear-filled eyes. "I saw them," she whispered. "I saw them kill Papa." The room fell silent except for Sarah's sobs. Hannah's face went pale. "Sarah, sweetheart, Papa died in an accident at work. You know that." "No." Sarah shook her head violently. "They heard him, in the warehouse. They thought I was sleeping, but I saw—" Ethan knelt beside the child. "Who did you see, Sarah?" "The man with the silver beard," Sarah whispered. "And the man with the gold watch." Hannah's eyes met Ethan's over Sarah's head. "Pierce. And someone with Robert's watch, now in Pierce's possession." "Did you tell anyone what you saw?" Ethan asked gently. Sarah nodded. "I told the sheriff. He said I was confused, that it was just a bad dream." She looked at her mother. "But it wasn't a dream, Mama." Later, when the children were occupied with chores, Hannah faced Ethan in the kitchen. "If what Sarah says is true, Robert was murdered, and Pierce was involved. Along with your brother's death in the creek," Ethan added. "Too much coincidence." "We need to leave," Hannah said. "Now, before anything happens to the children." "And go where?" Ethan asked. "With winter setting in and a killer who seems to have the law on his side?" Hannah slumped at the table. "What then?" Ethan stared out the window at the snowy landscape. "We find proof of what happened to Robert, and to your brother. Then we take it to the federal marshal in Helena. That's 100 miles in winter. First things first," Ethan said. "We need to know what Robert was working on before he died." The next night, while Hannah and the children slept, Ethan rode back to town. The warehouse where Robert had died stood at the edge of Timber Creek, a blackened skeleton against the night sky. Officially, it remained a crime scene, though Ethan doubted any real investigation had been conducted. He tied his horse in the shadows and approached cautiously, alert for any sign of the night watchman. The charred door hung from a single hinge, allowing him to slip inside without difficulty. The interior was a maze of collapsed beams and ash-covered debris. The smell of burnt wood still hung in the air, though the fire had occurred nearly 2 months ago. Ethan moved carefully, using a small lantern to light his way. Robert's body had been found near the back, according to town gossip. Ethan made his way there, examining the pattern of the burn. Something didn't match. If the fire had started from a knocked-over lamp as reported, the burn pattern would have spread from a central point. Instead, there were multiple points of origin. Deliberate. Professional. As he turned to leave, a shadow blocked the doorway. "Mighty late to be sightseeing, Calloway." Ethan raised his lantern, revealing Samuel Cooper, the town blacksmith. A tall black man in his 60s with powerful arms and a face lined by years of working at the forge. "Just satisfying some curiosity, Cooper," Ethan replied evenly. Cooper stepped inside, glancing around. "Curiosity about Robert Whitaker's death, I reckon." "You might say that." Cooper nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Figured you might come poking around, taking in the Whitaker woman like you did." "You know something about what happened here?" Ethan asked directly. "I know the sheriff spent about 5 minutes investigating before calling it an accident," Cooper said. "I know Pierce and a stranger I ain't never seen before were here the night of the fire, though nobody's mentioned that part." Ethan's interest sharpened. "You saw them?" "My shop's across the way. I was working late on the Wallace brothers' plow." Cooper moved further into the ruined building. "Heard voices, angry ones. Saw Pierce and this other fellow go in. Robert was already inside, working late as usual. And then? Then I minded my own business, like a black man's supposed to in a town like this. Cooper's voice was bitter. 20 minutes later, they came out. Just the two of them. About an hour after that, the place went up in flames. Ethan considered the implications. Would you testify to what you saw? Cooper laughed without humor. To who? Sheriff Tate? Judge Pierce himself? The only law around here is whatever Pierce says it is. There's a federal marshal in Helena, 100 miles away, Cooper scoffed. And even if he came, what then? My word against the most powerful man in the county. He shook his head. I aim to keep breathing, Calloway. Fair enough, Ethan conceded. But if things change, if we find more evidence, then maybe we talk again, Cooper allowed. In the meantime, you didn't see me, and I didn't see you. Back at the ranch, Ethan shared what he'd learned with Hannah. They spread Robert's journal and maps across the kitchen table, examining every detail. Here, Hannah pointed to a section of technical drawings. This is where Robert found the problem. The proposed route crosses this ridge where the old Silver Queen mine has tunnels running beneath. Ethan studied the careful calculations. He was thorough. Pressure tests, load-bearing estimates. Robert was meticulous, Hannah said with pride. He wouldn't report a problem unless he was absolutely certain. We need to find his official report, Ethan said, the one he sent to the railroad. It would have been filed at the company office in Helena. Hannah frowned, but there should have been a copy in his survey kit, which was kept at the warehouse. Convenient that a fire destroyed it all, Ethan observed. Maybe not all, Hannah said slowly. Robert was careful about his work. He often made duplicate copies of important documents. She hesitated. There's a compartment in the bottom of my trunk. I never opened it after everything happened. They moved to the bedroom where Hannah's trunk sat at the foot of the bed. She knelt, removed the contents, then pressed a hidden catch at the bottom. A false panel slid away, revealing a flat leather case. Inside were more papers, including a sealed envelope addressed to the railroad commissioner in Washington, D.C. He made a copy, Hannah breathed, eyes wide. Ethan examined the documents. A complete duplicate of Robert's report, including his final conclusion that the proposed route was dangerously unstable and required rerouting at significant expense. This is what got him killed, Ethan said quietly. Pierce couldn't let this report reach Washington. The delays and additional costs would have been enormous. And he'd have lost his commission from the railroad, Hannah added, plus the value of all that land he bought along the proposed route. A sudden pounding on the door interrupted them. Ethan motioned for Hannah to hide the journal and went to answer. Sheriff Tate stood on the porch, his weathered face grim beneath his hat. Calloway, need to speak with you about the body found in Timber Creek. Ethan stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. What about it? Identified as Daniel Reynolds, Hannah Whitaker's brother. Tate's eyes narrowed. Funny coincidence, him turning up dead on your property right when you take in his sister. Mighty funny, Ethan agreed, meeting the sheriff's gaze steadily, especially since he was shot, and I don't recall mentioning a body to anyone. Tate's hand moved slightly toward his gun. You suggesting something, Calloway? Just wondering how word travels in a blizzard. Ethan kept his own hands visible. And why a man would be shot coming to visit his sister. Maybe he wasn't just visiting. Tate looked toward the house. Maybe he knew something about his brother-in-law's business that some folks wouldn't want getting out. The implied threat wasn't subtle. That sounds like a matter for the law, Ethan said. It is, Tate nodded. Judge Pierce has called an inquest for next week. You and the Whitaker woman will testify. After the sheriff left, Ethan returned inside to find Hannah white-faced, having heard every word. They'll never let us leave now, she said. Not with what Sarah saw, not with what Robert knew. Now we have leverage, Ethan said. But we need to be careful. If Pierce suspects we have this, the children, Hannah whispered. If anything happened to them. Nothing will, Ethan promised, the intensity in his voice surprising them both. We protect what's ours, Hannah. All of it. Hannah studied his face in the dim lamplight. You meant it then, about being partners, about building something here. I told you, he said simply. I don't say things I don't mean. Hannah reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing his. It's been a long time since I had someone to trust. For both of us, Ethan admitted. Ethan looked around a house that had felt empty for 3 years until a week ago. At the children who had brought noise back into his silent rooms. At the woman who had awakened something he thought died with Margaret. Then we don't leave, he said. We stand our ground. Against the entire town? Against Pierce? Hannah shook her head. That's suicide. Not the entire town, Ethan corroborated, and not without evidence. He picked up Robert's journal. Your husband found something that got him killed. Something worth killing your brother to keep quiet. We need to find out what it was. And if we do, then we use it. Ethan's voice hardened with resolve. To protect what's ours. Their hands remained connected, a bridge forming between two damaged souls. Outside, snow continued to fall on a land that held both danger and promise. But inside, in the warmth of understanding that passed between them, something long frozen began to thaw. Not quite hope, not yet, but perhaps it's beginning. The night's resolve hardened into action with the new day. Ethan rose before anyone else, his mind already planning their next moves. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, erasing all traces of yesterday's visitors, a reminder that nature offered both protection and peril. He stood at the bedroom window, watching as the eastern sky transitioned from black to pale lavender, the first light revealing a transformed landscape. 5 days until the inquest. 5 critical days to gather allies, strengthen their evidence, and prepare for what would surely be Pierce's attempt to destroy them through his own corrupted legal system. The thought of facing the judge in his own courtroom with Sheriff Tate standing guard twisted Ethan's stomach. But they had chosen their path now. No running, no hiding. They would stand their ground. Ethan dressed quietly and made his way to the kitchen. To his surprise, Hannah was already there, a pot of coffee brewing on the stove. Couldn't sleep, he asked. She shook her head. Too much to think about. Neither of them mentioned the moment their hands had touched the night before, the unexpected connection that had formed between them. Some things were better left unspoken, at least for now. They had more pressing concerns. I need to ride to the Wallace property today, Ethan said, accepting the cup she offered. They're my biggest cattle buyers, need to know if I still have a contract with them. Because of us, Hannah said, her voice flat. Because Pierce is squeezing them, Ethan corrected. They need to understand which side offers the better future. And if they won't listen? Ethan sipped his coffee, appreciating its surprising strength. Hannah made it the way he liked it, though he'd never said as much. Then we adjust. But I won't let you and the children suffer for it. I've been thinking about the inquest, Hannah said, changing the subject. What do we tell them about Daniel, about what Sarah saw? Nothing about Sarah, Ethan said firmly. She's been through enough. As for Daniel, we stick to what they already know. I found him in the creek, that's all. And Robert's report? We keep that hidden for now. Once Pierce knows we have it, we lose whatever advantage it gives us. Hannah nodded slowly. So we're just playing for time. Time to build a stronger case, to find more evidence, Ethan confirmed, and to contact someone outside Pierce's reach, the federal marshal in Helena. I've sent word, Ethan said, but we can't count on help arriving before the inquest. Hannah's fingers tightened around her cup. Then we face them alone. Not alone, Ethan corrected, together. After breakfast, Ethan saddled his horse. The temperature had risen overnight, turning the fresh snow heavy and wet, the kind that could collapse a roof under its weight if not cleared. As he mounted, Hannah came out to the porch, wrapped in one of Margaret's old shawls. Be careful, she said simply. Ethan nodded, understanding all that remained unspoken between them. The Wallace Ranch lay 5 miles west, one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. Brothers Henry and Joseph Wallace had built it from nothing after the Civil War, proving themselves fair but hard businessmen. They'd been among Ethan's first customers when he started raising cattle 3 years ago. The ride took longer than usual, the horse struggling through snow that reached its knees in places. When Ethan finally crested the ridge overlooking the Wallace property, he saw activity in the yard below. Men loading crates onto a wagon, others moving cattle into a smaller holding pen. Not their usual winter routine. Henry Wallace met Ethan at the gate, his normally ruddy face pale with tension. Didn't expect to see you, Calloway, he said, without preamble. Figured our business was concluded. Ethan dismounted, tying his horse to the post. Thought we should discuss that face to face. Henry glanced toward the house where his brother Joseph watched from the window. Not much to discuss. We're moving our operation, found better rates with the Billings outfit. Billings is 80 miles east, Ethan observed. Long way to drive cattle for a better rate. Times are changing, Henry said, not meeting Ethan's eyes. Railroad's coming. Opens new markets. Railroad's not here yet, Ethan countered. And you've got 200 head to feed through winter. My graze land is the best option within 50 miles, and you know it. Henry finally looked at him directly. Pierce came by yesterday, made it clear our supply contracts with the mining company depend on certain adjustments to our other business relationships. He's threatening your livelihood over your connection to me, Ethan said flatly. Not just that, Henry lowered his voice. Joseph's boy needs surgery in Chicago. Expensive. Pierce arranged a bank loan through Harding. He shook his head. We can't cross him, Ethan, not with Tommy's life at stake. Ethan absorbed this quietly. Another family caught in Pierce's web. Another example of how the judge maintained his control, using people's vulnerabilities against them. I understand, he said finally. Family comes first. Henry seemed relieved, though shame still colored his features. For what it's worth, we don't believe what they say about the Whitaker woman. Not all of it, anyway. Appreciate that, Ethan said, though the words felt hollow. As he turned to leave, Henry called after him. Be careful, Ethan. Word is Pierce isn't just angry about you taking in the widow. He's afraid of something. Never seen him like this. Afraid of what? Don't know, Henry admitted. But a frightened snake strikes hardest. Watch your back. Ethan rode home through thickening clouds that promised more snow. Henry's warning echoed in his mind. Pierce was afraid, which meant the judge knew something they didn't, or feared they knew something he couldn't afford to have revealed. Halfway back to his ranch, movement in the trees caught Ethan's attention. A flicker of dark against white, gone almost before he registered it. He slowed, hand moving to the rifle in its saddle holster. Show yourself, he called. I'm not in a patient mood. For a moment, nothing. Then Samuel Cooper emerged from the trees, leading a mule laden with blacksmithing tools. Not looking for trouble, Calloway, the blacksmith said, raising empty hands. Just taking the back way to the Jenkins place. Their plow needs mending before the ground thaws. Ethan relaxed slightly, though his hand remained near his weapon. Long way from your usual road. Seems like the main road's gotten dangerous lately, Cooper replied meaningfully. Especially for some folks. What do you mean? Cooper approached slowly, his voice dropping. Two strangers in town, mean-looking men, been asking about you and the Whitaker family. Not the friendly kind of asking. Pierce's men? Don't think so. They ain't local, that's for sure. Got the look of professionals about them. Cooper adjusted his tool load. Thought you should know. Ethan considered this new information. Appreciate the warning. Cooper nodded, then hesitated. Been thinking about what you asked, about testifying to what I saw that night. Changed your mind? Maybe. Cooper looked uncomfortable. My sister's boy is a lawyer in Helena now, first colored graduate from the law school in St. Louis. Maybe he could help, if it came to that. That could be valuable, Ethan acknowledged, but it would put you at risk. Already at risk, Cooper said with a humorless smile. Pierce has been looking for a reason to run me out of town for years. Only hasn't because I'm the only blacksmith within 30 miles who can handle the mining equipment repairs. He straightened. Anyway, just letting you know, if you need me, I'll consider it. As they parted ways, Ethan felt the first true stirring of hope. Perhaps they weren't as alone as he'd thought. Small allies emerging from unexpected places. Still, the news of strangers asking questions troubled him. If they weren't Pierce's men, whose were they? And what did they want? He pushed his horse harder through the deepening snow, eager to return to the ranch, to Hannah and the children. The thought surprised him with its intensity. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a solitary man with little to protect beyond his land and livestock. Now, suddenly, he had people to safeguard, a responsibility that weighed heavily, yet somehow made him feel more complete than he had since Margaret's death. When the ranch house finally came into view, Ethan saw William on the porch, frantically waving. Something was wrong. He spurred his horse forward, covering the last quarter mile at a gallop. It's Sarah, William cried as Ethan dismounted. She's gone. Ethan gripped the boy's shoulders. What happened? She was helping Ma with the washing, William explained, words tumbling out. Then she said she saw someone by the creek, a man watching the house. Ma told her to stay inside, but when we weren't looking, his voice cracked. She's been gone nearly an hour. Ma's out looking now. Cold fear gripped Ethan's chest. Where? Down by the creek. But it's snowing harder now and... Stay in the house, Ethan ordered. Bar the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or your mother. He retrieved his rifle from the saddle, checked it was loaded, and strode toward the creek. The snow was falling more heavily now, obscuring tracks almost as quickly as they were made. He found Hannah halfway to the water, her coat inadequate against the cold, face frantic with worry. Ethan, she cried when she saw him. She's nowhere along the bank. I've called and called. Did you see anyone? The man William mentioned. No, but... She pointed to a spot near a cluster of pine trees. There were footprints there, too big for Sarah, a man's boots. Ethan examined the area, finding only the faintest impression now, rapidly filling with fresh snow, but it was enough to confirm someone had been watching the house. You need to get back inside, he told Hannah. William's alone. I'm not leaving without Sarah, she said firmly. Hannah, she's my daughter, Ethan. The fear and determination in her voice left no room for argument. Ethan nodded, handing her his sidearm. Stay close then, and if you see anyone besides Sarah, shoot first and ask questions later. They followed the creek for half a mile, calling Sarah's name every few yards. The snow was nearly 6 inches deep now and still falling. If she was out in this without proper clothing, a sound caught Ethan's attention. Not a child's voice, but the soft nickering of a horse. He raised his rifle, moving carefully toward a thick stand of cottonwoods. There, huddled beneath the protective branches, sat Sarah, and beside her, surprisingly, was Mabel Foster, the minister's wife. They were sharing a thick blanket, and the older woman was speaking softly to the child. Sarah! Hannah rushed forward. The girl looked up, tears frozen on her cheeks. Mama! Mrs. Foster rose stiffly, her kind face grave. Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Calloway, thank goodness you found us. Ethan kept his rifle ready, scanning the surrounding trees. What are you doing out here with Sarah, Mrs. Foster? I came to warn you, she said. I found this little one wandering by the creek. She said she was following a man, but I didn't see anyone. Hannah gathered Sarah into her arms. Why would you follow someone, sweetheart? You know better than to talk to strangers. It wasn't a stranger, Mama, Sarah said, her voice small. It was the man with Papa's watch. Hannah's eyes met Ethan's, alarm clear in her expression. Pierce was here? Ethan asked sharply. No, not the silver-beard man, Sarah corrected. The other one, the tall man with the scar on his face. He was wearing Papa's watch now, the one who was with Pierce when they hurt Papa. Ethan's mind raced. One of the hired men Cooper had described, the tall one with the scar across his jaw. The pieces were falling into place. Not just hired guns, but witnesses to Robert's murder, still working for Pierce. Ethan turned to Mrs. Foster. You said you came to warn us. About what? The minister's wife glanced nervously at Sarah. Perhaps we should speak privately. Whatever you have to say can be said in front of Hannah, Ethan insisted. Mrs. Foster nodded. My husband overheard Judge Pierce and Sheriff Tate last night. They were discussing the inquest and other matters. She lowered her voice. They mean to arrest Mrs. Whitaker for conspiracy in her husband's alleged embezzlement and to place the children in state custody. Hannah's arms tightened around Sarah. They can't do that. I've done nothing wrong. It doesn't matter, Mrs. Foster said sadly. The judge has already drafted the custody order. He'll execute it at the inquest before you can defend yourself. And your husband didn't try to stop this? Ethan demanded. Jonathan has opposed Pierce before, Mrs. Foster replied, a defensive edge in her voice. Last year, when the Wilkins family lost their farm, Pierce had him removed from his position for 3 months. We nearly starved. She straightened her shoulders. But he sent me to warn you, at considerable risk to us both. Ethan's anger cooled. Another family caught in Pierce's web of control. We appreciate it, Mrs. Foster, truly. There's more, she continued. Pierce has sent for 2 men from Helena, professionals, they say, to handle complications at the inquest. What kind of complications? Hannah asked. Mrs. Foster wouldn't meet her eyes. The kind that might resist arrest or flee jurisdiction. He's expecting trouble, Ethan concluded, planning for it. My husband believes so, Mrs. Foster confirmed. The men arrived yesterday. They're staying at the Golden Spike Hotel. The same men Cooper had mentioned, Ethan realized. Not just asking questions, preparing for action. You should leave, Mrs. Foster urged. Tonight while you can. Jonathan can help arrange passage east. Hannah looked to Ethan, the question clear in her eyes. It was tempting to flee to seek safety elsewhere. But Ethan knew better than most that running rarely solved problems of this magnitude. It only postponed them. Thank you, Mrs. Foster, he said, but I think we'll stay and face this head on. The older woman nodded as if she'd expected no less. Then may God be with you, Mr. Calloway. You'll need his help against what's coming. They escorted Mrs. Foster back to her horse, hidden in a small copse a quarter-mile away. As she mounted, she pressed a small package into Hannah's hands. Medicines, she explained, and food. Not much, but it might help. As they watched her ride away, Hannah turned to Ethan. We can't let them take my children. They won't, Ethan promised. We have 5 days until the inquest. That's 5 days to prepare our defense. Against false charges? Against a judge who's already decided we're guilty? Hannah's voice rose with frustration. What defense can we possibly prepare? Ethan looked down at Sarah, who watched them with solemn eyes that had seen too much. The truth, he said simply. We bring everything into the light. Robert's report, Sarah's testimony, Cooper's statement, all of it. It won't be enough, Hannah argued. Not against Pierce's influence. Maybe not in his courtroom, Ethan acknowledged. But if we can delay things until the federal marshal arrives. If he arrives, Hannah interrupted, if he believes us over a county judge. Ethan took her hand, surprising them both with the gesture. Then we make sure the evidence is too compelling to ignore. Back at the ranch, they found William anxiously watching from the window. The boy's relief at seeing his sister safe quickly turned to anger. Why did you run off? He demanded of Sarah. You scared everyone. Sarah shrank against her mother. I saw the bad man, the one who hurt Papa. William's face paled. Here? At our house? By the creek, Sarah confirmed. He waved at me to come. Hannah knelt before her daughter. Sarah, listen to me. If you ever see that man again, you don't follow him. You run the other way. You find me or Ethan immediately. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, eyes wide. Good girl. Hannah hugged her tightly. Now go change into dry clothes. William, help your sister. When the children had gone upstairs, Hannah turned to Ethan, her composure finally cracking. He was here, watching us, luring my child away. Her hands trembled. What kind of monster? The kind who's desperate, Ethan said. Pierce wouldn't risk sending someone to our property unless he was truly afraid of what we might know. Sarah could have been taken, or worse. But she wasn't, Ethan reminded her. And now we're warned. No one leaves the house alone from now on. Hannah nodded, then suddenly seemed to notice the package Mrs. Foster had given her. She unwrapped it, revealing a small loaf of bread, some dried meat, and a bottle of medicine. Beneath these lay a folded piece of paper. What's this? She murmured, opening it. Ethan moved closer, reading over her shoulder. It was a list of names, dates, and amounts, written in a careful hand. Payment records, he realized, for the railroad land acquisitions. Hannah scanned the page. These are all local properties, the Wilkins farm, the old Thompson place. She looked up at Ethan. All bought within the last year. All along the proposed railroad route, Ethan added, and all for a fraction of what they'll be worth once the railroad comes through. Mrs. Foster said her husband opposed Pierce when the Wilkins lost their farm, Hannah recalled. He must have been keeping records. Ethan studied the list more carefully. Look at the payment sources. Some from Pierce directly, but others from the Union Pacific Development Fund. He tapped the page. That's not an official railroad account. That's Pierce's slush fund, disguised as railroad business. How do you know? Because real railroad acquisitions would go through their land office in Helena, not through a local judge. Ethan's mind raced. This could be evidence of fraud, using inside information about the railroad route to buy land cheap before the route was publicly announced. Is that illegal? When you're officially representing the railroad's interests? Yes. Ethan carefully folded the paper. This gives us more leverage, but it's still not enough to stop Pierce completely. What would be enough? Hannah asked. Ethan considered the question. Proof that Pierce knew about the safety issues with the route and suppressed that information. Proof that he was involved in Robert's death. He looked at her, and someone with authority who can't be bought or intimidated. The federal marshal and the railroad commissioner, Ethan added. If we can get Robert's report to the right people, show them the danger Pierce is willing to ignore. Hannah's face hardened with resolve. Then we need to ride to Helena. In this weather with 2 children? Ethan shook his head. 100 miles of mountain passes in winter is dangerous enough for an experienced rider traveling alone. For a family, it would be suicide. Then what do we do? Hannah demanded. Wait for Pierce to take my children? Wait for his men to finish what they started with Robert and Daniel? Ethan paced the room, mind working. We need to buy time, delay the inquest somehow. That's impossible. Pierce controls the court. But he doesn't control the weather, Ethan said slowly, an idea forming. Or the railroad schedule. Hannah looked confused. What do you mean? The railroad inspector, Ethan explained. According to Robert's journal, he's supposed to arrive next week to approve the final route before construction begins in spring. So what if we made sure he saw the evidence of the route's dangers? What if we forced an inspection of the area Robert identified as unstable? Hannah caught on quickly. Pierce couldn't proceed with the inquest if the railroad officials were present. He'd have to maintain his public persona. Exactly, Ethan said, and it would give the federal marshal more time to arrive. But how do we contact the inspector? We can't exactly send a telegram without Pierce finding out. Ethan smiled grimly. No, but Cooper might know someone who can. The next day dawned clear and cold. Ethan rode into town alone despite Hannah's objections. They needed supplies, and more importantly, they needed to set their plan in motion. The streets of Timber Creek were quiet, most people choosing to stay indoors with winter tightening its grip. Cooper's blacksmith shop sat at the edge of town, the forge's warmth a welcome relief from the biting cold. The blacksmith was working alone, hammering a piece of glowing metal into shape. He looked up as Ethan entered, nodding in greeting. Expected you might come by, he said, setting down his hammer. Heard about the excitement at your place yesterday. News traveled fast, even in a snowstorm. Mrs. Foster, Ethan guessed. Minister came by this morning, wanted to know if I'd seen any strangers round my shop. Cooper wiped his hands on a rag. Told him I mind my own business, but we both knew what he was really asking. And had you seen them? Cooper nodded toward the back room. Come, not safe to talk here. In the relative privacy of the storeroom, Cooper spoke in a low voice. They were here yesterday morning. 2 of them. One tall and lean with a scar across his jaw. The other shorter, built like a bull. Asked if I knew the Whitaker woman or her brother. What did you tell them? That I fix metal, not gossip, Cooper replied. But they weren't fooled. Said they'd be back with more specific questions. Hired guns, Ethan muttered. Pierce is getting desperate. Desperate men are dangerous, Cooper observed. What do you need from me, Calloway? I'm guessing this isn't a social call. Ethan explained his plan to contact the railroad inspector. Cooper listened intently, nodding occasionally. Might work, he said when Ethan finished. But you'll need to get word to Helena without Pierce finding out. That's where I hoped you might help, Ethan admitted. You mentioned your nephew is a lawyer there. James, Cooper confirmed. Smart boy. Made something of himself despite everything stacked against him. Could he help us? Contact the Railroad Commission? Perhaps get a message to the inspector directly? Cooper considered this. He could, but it would put him at risk too. I understand if you don't want to involve him, Ethan said. You've already taken enough chances helping us. Cooper was silent for a long moment, then reached for a pencil and paper. I'll write to him. Can't promise he'll help, but I'll explain the situation. He began writing. What exactly should I tell him? That the railroad's proposed route through Timber Creek crosses unstable ground. That the surveyor who discovered this was killed before he could report it. That we have his original report and need to get it to the inspector before more lives are risked. As Cooper wrote, the shop bell jingled. Both men tensed. Cooper motioned for Ethan to stay hidden, then moved back to the main room. Ethan heard muffled voices. Then Cooper returned, his expression grim. Sheriff Tate, he murmured, asking about you. Ethan reached for his gun. No need for that, Cooper said. Told him you had been by yesterday to order horseshoes, nothing more. He seemed satisfied. For now, Ethan said, but he'll be watching the shop. Then you'll leave the back way, Cooper decided, finishing his letter and sealing it. My son can deliver this to the stage office in Garrison. Pierce doesn't control the mail there. How soon can your nephew act on it? If all goes well, 3 days, maybe 4. Cooper handed Ethan the sealed letter. But you'll need to survive until then. Ethan tucked the letter inside his coat. We will. There's something else you should know, Cooper said, lowering his voice further. Those 2 strangers, they weren't just asking about you and the Whitakers. They were asking about a package, something they believed Daniel Reynolds was carrying when he died. A package? Ethan frowned. I found nothing on his body except the letter and train ticket. Well, they seem mighty interested in finding whatever it was, Cooper said. Offered gold for information. This new piece of this puzzle troubled Ethan. What had Daniel been carrying that was worth killing for? And where was it now? As he prepared to leave through the shop's rear exit, Cooper gripped his arm. Be extra careful around Sheriff Tate, he warned in a low voice. He's dangerous in ways most folks don't understand. I've never trusted the man, Ethan assured him. It's worse than you think, Cooper continued, glancing over his shoulder. My father was in Missouri during the border troubles. He recognized Pierce years ago, but kept quiet out of fear. Said there was another man always with him during the raids, a younger fellow who did the worst of Pierce's bidding without question. Cooper's eyes hardened. The description matches Tate perfectly. Whatever Pierce asks, Tate will do, no matter how vile. Remember that. Ethan filed this observation away as he slipped out the back door and into the alley. The town seemed unnaturally quiet as he made his way to the general store for supplies. Frank Williams served him with cold efficiency, his normally friendly manner replaced by cautious formality. "Anything else?" Frank asked as he wrapped the last of Ethan's purchases. "Just information," Ethan replied. "Has the stage been running regular with all this snow?" Frank's eyes darted toward the door before answering. "Been delayed. Road to Helena is nearly impassable. Last driver said they lost a wheel in the high pass. Bad news for their plan to contact the federal marshal. When's the next one expected?" "Tomorrow, maybe. Weather permitting." Frank lowered his voice. "Calloway, whatever you're planning, be careful. Pierce has been asking questions about you, strange questions." "What kind of questions?" "About your time in the war, your regiment, your commanding officers." Frank shook his head. Never known him to take such an interest before. "Interesting." Pierce was digging into his past, looking for leverage perhaps, or weaknesses to exploit. Ethan had nearly reached his horse when a familiar voice called his name. He turned to see Robert Collins approaching, looking troubled. "Ethan," his old friend said, "didn't expect to see you in town." "Just supplies," Ethan replied neutrally. Their last conversation still rankled. Robert glanced around, then stepped closer. "Look, I'm sorry about the other day, about what I said regarding the Whitaker woman and her children." "Hannah," Ethan corrected. "Her name is Hannah." "Hannah," Robert acknowledged. "Thing is, Pierce came by again yesterday, asking all sorts of questions about you, about your relationship with Hannah." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing useful," Robert assured him. "But Ethan, he's building something against you, some kind of case. He even had documents from your military service." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What documents?" "Court-martial proceedings," Robert said. "Something about disobeying orders during Gettysburg." He looked confused. "I didn't even know you were court-martialed." "I wasn't," Ethan said flatly. "Charges were filed, but dismissed. My commanding officer abandoned our position during a blizzard. I led the survivors to safety instead of maintaining our assigned post." "Well, Pierce is spinning it differently," Robert warned, "making it sound like you abandoned your duty, cost lives." The old anger rose in Ethan's chest. 14 men survived because of what I did. Without me, they'd all have frozen to death, waiting for orders that never came. "I believe you," Robert said, "but Pierce is twisting it, using it to question your character, your judgment." He hesitated. "And he's connecting it to Hannah somehow, suggesting you have a pattern of making reckless decisions that endanger others." The pieces fell into place in Ethan's mind. Pierce wasn't just preparing for the inquest. He was building a narrative, portraying Ethan as unstable, a man whose judgment couldn't be trusted. Someone whose testimony about finding Daniel's body would be dismissed. Someone who might even be implicated in Daniel's death. "Thanks for the warning," Ethan said. "Anything else I should know?" Robert looked pained. "The inquest date's been moved up. It's not next week anymore. It's the day after tomorrow." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Why the change?" "Pierce claims it's to accommodate the railroad inspector's visit," Robert explained. "Says he wants the matter settled before official business begins." Pierce was accelerating his timeline, cutting off their options. Cooper's letter wouldn't reach Helena in time now. They'd have to face the inquest without outside help. "I should get back," Ethan said, mounting his horse. "Hannah needs to know." Robert nodded. "Ethan, whatever you're planning, whatever evidence you think you have, be careful. Pierce isn't just a judge. He's got powerful friends beyond Timber Creek." "And we have the truth," Ethan replied. "Sometimes that's enough." But as he rode home through the gathering dusk, Ethan wondered if that were really true. In his experience, truth alone rarely prevailed against power and corruption. It needed teeth, evidence, witnesses, authority. All things they were quickly running out of. The ranch house came into view, lamplight glowing in the windows. Inside, Hannah would be preparing dinner, the children helping with chores. The domestic scene he'd returned to these past weeks, so different from the empty house he'd known before. Something fierce and protective surged in his chest. These people had become his responsibility, his family, in all but name. He would not let Pierce destroy that, not without a fight. As Ethan stabled his horse, he noticed fresh tracks in the snow leading to the house. A single rider arrived recently. His hand moved to his gun as he approached the front door cautiously. Inside, he found Hannah sitting at the kitchen table across from a stranger. A young, well-dressed black man with intelligent eyes and Cooper's unmistakable profile. "Ethan," Hannah said, rising, This is James Cooper, Samuel's nephew. She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen in days. He's come from Helena to help us. James Cooper cut an impressive figure despite his youth, no more than 30, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to walking in rooms where he wasn't welcome. His suit was tailored, Eastern in style, though now dusty from travel. As he rose to greet Ethan, the family resemblance to his Uncle Samuel was unmistakable in the set of his jaw and the breadth of his shoulders. "Mr. Calloway," he said, extending his hand, "my uncle speaks highly of you." Ethan shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip. "Wasn't expecting you so soon. Or at all, for that matter." "I was already on my way to Timber Creek when my uncle's letter reached me in Garrison," James explained. "A fortunate coincidence." Ethan remained cautious. "What business brings a Helena lawyer to Timber Creek in the dead of winter?" "The same business that concerns you," James replied, unruffled by Ethan's suspicion. "Judge Emmett Pierce and his railroad dealings." Hannah moved to Ethan's side. "Mr. Cooper has been explaining. He works for the Territorial Governor's Office, investigating corruption in the railroad land acquisitions." "We've had our eye on Pierce for some time," James confirmed, "but he's been careful, covering his tracks, until now." "Until Robert Whitaker's report," Ethan surmised. James nodded. "And until his murder, which Pierce couldn't hide as neatly." "You believe Robert was murdered?" Hannah asked, hope and pain mingling in her voice. "I know he was," James said quietly. "Just as I know your brother Daniel was killed because he was bringing evidence against Pierce to the territorial authorities." He looked at Ethan. "Evidence you may have found on his body." "There was nothing but a letter and a train ticket," Ethan replied. "I checked his pockets thoroughly." James frowned. "Then Pierce's men must have reached him first, taken what they were looking for." He paused. "Yet they're still searching, which means they're not certain they have everything." Ethan glanced at Hannah, then back to James. "How do we know we can trust you?" "You don't," James acknowledged. "But I'm likely your only chance at stopping Pierce before the inquest." He nodded toward the window where darkness had fallen, "which I understand has been moved to the day after tomorrow." This last bit of information, which they'd only just learned themselves, convinced Ethan more than anything else James had said. "You're well informed." "I have sources in town," James said simply, "including my uncle." Hannah set a plate of food before him. "You must be hungry after your journey. Please eat while we talk." James accepted, gratefully. As he ate, Ethan explained everything they knew. Robert's report on the unstable ground beneath the proposed railroad route, Sarah's eyewitness account of her father's murder, Pierce wearing Robert's watch, Daniel's death, and the document Mrs. Foster had provided showing Pierce's questionable land acquisitions. James listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed his legal mind. When Ethan finished, the young lawyer sat back, contemplative. "You have more than I expected," he admitted, "especially the land transaction records and the original survey report. But Pierce will claim the report is falsified in a child's testimony." He shook his head. "Sarah knows what she saw," Hannah said firmly. "I don't doubt it," James assured her. "But a court might, especially one presided over by Pierce himself." "So we're back where we started," Ethan said grimly. "Not quite." James reached into his coat, removing a folded document. "I have something that might help. A sworn statement from Jacob Wilkins, the former owner of one of the properties Pierce acquired last year." "The Wilkins farm," Hannah recalled. "It's on the list Mrs. Foster gave us." James nodded. "Pierce forced him out by calling in loans through Harding's bank that Wilkins never actually took." "Sound familiar?" "Exactly what they tried with me after Robert died," Hannah confirmed. "Wilkins is dying of consumption in Helena," James continued. "Nothing left to lose, so he's finally talking." His statement details how Pierce and Harding conspired to seize his land through fraudulent debt collection. "It's the first direct evidence we have linking Pierce to illegal land seizures." "Will it be enough?" Ethan asked. "Not by itself," James admitted, "but combined with Robert's report and the other evidence you've gathered." He spread his hands. "It might be enough to convince the federal marshal to investigate, especially if we can get the railroad inspector involved." "The inspector isn't due until after the inquest now," Ethan pointed out. "That's what Pierce wants everyone to believe," James said with a small smile. "But I happen to know Inspector Collins arrived in Garrison yesterday. He'll be in Timber Creek by tomorrow afternoon." Hope flickered in Hannah's eyes. "Then we have a chance." "A small one," James cautioned. "We need to get your evidence to Collins before Pierce can control the narrative, and we need to ensure your safety until then." He looked around the kitchen. "Where are the children?" "Upstairs, sleeping," Hannah replied. "They've had a difficult day." They should be prepared to leave quickly if necessary, James advised. Pierce won't hesitate to use them against you. No one is taking my children, Hannah said, her voice hardening. Not while I'm alive. Let's ensure it doesn't come to that, James said gently. Our priority now is to reach Inspector Collins with the evidence before Pierce can interfere. Pierce will have men watching the roads, Ethan observed, and the town, which is why I didn't come directly to your ranch, James explained. I've been careful to maintain the appearance that I'm here on unrelated territorial business. As far as Pierce knows, I'm simply investigating general land title issues. You've spoken to him already? Ethan asked sharply. Briefly at the courthouse this morning. James smiled thinly. He was perfectly cordial, if somewhat concerned about my unexpected arrival, particularly when I mentioned reviewing recent land transactions. You deliberately provoked him, Ethan realized. I needed to gauge his reaction, James confirmed, and to distract him. While he was busy trying to manage me, my associate was making discreet inquiries about the Whitaker case. Your associate? Hannah questioned. Thomas Reed, U.S. Deputy Marshal. James's expression grew serious. He's waiting in garrison for my signal. I couldn't risk bringing him into Timber Creek directly. Pierce would recognize federal authority immediately and accelerate his plans. Ethan processed this new information. So we have a plan? We do, James confirmed. Tomorrow morning, I'll arrange to meet with Inspector Collins as soon as he arrives. Once I've briefed him on the situation and shown him Robert's report, Reed will bring in enough deputies to secure the courthouse and ensure the inquest proceeds fairly, if it proceeds at all. And until then, Hannah asked. Until then, you stay here, out of sight, James instructed. Pierce's men will be watching, but they're unlikely to make a move before the inquest. They want everything to appear legal. Those men who were asking about a package Daniel was carrying, Ethan said. Any idea what they're looking for? James hesitated. Not with certainty, but Daniel contacted me before leaving Helena, said he had documentary evidence of Pierce's involvement in criminal activity beyond the land fraud, something from before his time in Timber Creek. Pierce and Sheriff Tate go back a long way, Ethan recalled. Cooper mentioned they knew each other in Missouri before the war. That's consistent with what we've pieced together, James confirmed. They were both involved in border disputes during the Kansas-Missouri conflicts. Ugly business. He looked troubled. Whatever Daniel found, it was significant enough that he wouldn't trust it to the mail or telegraph. The kitchen fell silent as they contemplated the implications. Finally, Hannah spoke. You should stay here tonight, Mr. Cooper. It's too dangerous to return to town now. James nodded gratefully. Thank you, but I should leave before first light tomorrow. I need to intercept Inspector Collins before Pierce can reach him. I'll ride with you, Ethan decided. You'll have a better chance of getting through if there's two of us. No, Hannah objected immediately. You can't leave us unprotected. Ethan understood her fear, but James was right. Reaching the inspector was their priority. Still, leaving Hannah and the children alone felt wrong. What about your uncle? Ethan asked James. Could he stay here until we return? He'd do it, James confirmed, though it would reveal his involvement. Better than leaving Hannah and the children without protection, Ethan insisted. They spent the next hour planning, weighing options, contingencies. By the time they finished, the fire had burned low, and exhaustion pulled at them all. James accepted the offered place to sleep in the spare room, while Hannah retreated upstairs to check on her children. Ethan remained in the kitchen, staring into the dying embers when Hannah returned. The children are still asleep, she said softly, settling into the chair beside him. Thankfully, Sarah seems to have forgotten today's trauma, at least for now. Children are resilient, Ethan observed, more than we sometimes give them credit for. Hannah reached for his hand, no hesitation now. I'm afraid, Ethan. He turned his palm up, clasping her fingers. I know, but we'll get through this. How can you be sure? Her eyes searched his face. Pierce has all the power, all the advantages. Not all, Ethan corrected. He doesn't have the truth, and he doesn't have what we have. Which is something worth fighting for. Her fingers tightened around his. When this is over, if we survive it. We will. But if we do, she persisted, what then? For us, I mean. It was a question Ethan had been asking himself with increasing frequency. What did he want beyond survival, beyond justice? The answer came with surprising clarity. Then we build something here, he said simply, together. Hannah's eyes glistened in the firelight. I'd like that. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious amid the danger surrounding them. Ethan leaned forward, and Hannah met him halfway. Their kiss was gentle, tentative at first, then deepening with unspoken promises. When they parted, something fundamental had shifted, acknowledged at last. "We should get some rest," Hannah murmured. "Tomorrow will be demanding." Ethan nodded, though he suspected neither of them would sleep much. Too much uncertainty lay ahead. But at least now they faced it with one certainty between them. Dawn broke gray and cold, with low clouds promising more snow before the day ended. Ethan woke from fitful sleep to find James already dressed and ready to depart. They moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Hannah or the children. In the kitchen, Ethan wrote a brief note explaining their plans, then gathered his rifle and ammunition. Outside, the temperature had dropped further overnight, the kind of bone-deep cold that made every breath painful. As they saddled their horses, Ethan explained the fastest road to intercept the stage from Garrison. "There's a narrow pass about 5 miles south where the road cuts between two ridges," he said, tightening the cinch on his saddle. "If we position ourselves there, we can't miss the stage." "Unless Pierce has men watching the same spot," James cautioned. "Possible," Ethan acknowledged, "but unlikely he'd spare men for every possible interception point, especially in this weather." They were about to mount when the sound of approaching hooves made them both reach for their weapons. Through the pre-dawn gloom, a single rider appeared, pushing his horse hard despite the treacherous footing. As he drew closer, Ethan recognized Samuel Cooper. "Uncle," James called softly, "what's happened?" Samuel reined in his lathered horse, his expression grave. "Pierce knows you're here," he told James, "and he knows why. Someone talked." "Who?" Ethan demanded. "Don't know," Samuel admitted, "but there's more. The inspector's stage was stopped outside Garrison last night. Armed men. They're holding him at the Golden Spike Hotel under guard." James swore under his breath. "Pierce is moving faster than we anticipated." "That's not all," Samuel continued. "Sheriff Tate's deputized 6 men this morning. They're preparing to ride out here, official business, he says." "The inquest," Ethan realized. "He's bringing it to us, not waiting for tomorrow." "Or using it as cover to arrest Hannah," James said grimly. "We need to change plans." Ethan was already turning back toward the house. "We need to warn Hannah, get the children ready to move." "Where will you go?" Samuel asked. "Every road will be watched." "Not every road," Ethan replied, thinking quickly. "There's an old trapper's trail that leads up to the high ridge, then down into the next valley. It's barely passable in summer, let alone winter, but it's our best chance." "You'll never make it with the children," Samuel objected. "We have to try," Ethan insisted. "If we can reach the Thompson homestead on the other side, old Jim Thompson will hide us. From there, we might make it to Helena." James considered this. "I should continue to town, try to reach Reed and Garrison, let him know what's happened." "Too risky," Samuel warned. "They'll be watching for you now." "They'll be watching for a well-dressed lawyer," James countered, "not a blacksmith's assistant." He looked to his uncle. "I'll need your work clothes." Understanding dawned in Samuel's eyes. "Might work? You still remember the trade?" "Enough to be convincing," James assured him. "We swapped places like this before, remember? When those riders from Dodge City came looking for me." The plan formed quickly. James would return to town disguised as Samuel's apprentice, then try to get word to Reed. Samuel would come to the ranch, help prepare Hannah and the children for their escape. They'd use the old trapper's trail to reach the Thompson place, then continue to Helena if necessary. "How long before Tate and his men arrive?" Ethan asked. 2 hours, maybe less, Samuel estimated. They were still gathering when I left. Not much time. Ethan and Samuel hurried inside while James changed into his uncle's spare clothes, transforming himself from lawyer to laborer with surprising effectiveness. When Hannah saw them enter, she immediately knew something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked, already moving to wake the children. As Ethan explained the situation, Hannah's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "How soon can we be ready?" "Pack only what's essential," Ethan instructed. "Warm clothes for the children, food, whatever medicines you have. Everything else stays." While Hannah prepared the children, Ethan and Samuel gathered supplies: ammunition, blankets, dried meat, and hardtack. James departed on Samuel's horse, riding back toward town via a circuitous route to avoid detection. William appeared in the kitchen, sleep-tousled but alert, eyes wide as he took in the frantic activity. "Are the bad men coming?" "Yes," Ethan answered honestly, "but we're leaving before they get here." The boy squared his small shoulders. "What can I do to help?" Ethan felt a surge of pride at the child's courage. "Help your mother with Sarah. Make sure she stays calm and does exactly what we tell her." William nodded solemnly and returned upstairs. Minutes later, Hannah descended with both children, now dressed in their warmest clothes, small bundles in their arms. "We're ready," she said. Ethan looked at the family before him. Hannah's determined face, William's serious eyes, little Sarah clutching her rag doll, and felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. These people had become his in a way he'd never expected, never thought to have again after Margaret. He would not lose them. The trapper's trail starts beyond the north pasture, he explained to Hannah. It's rough going, especially with children, but it's our best chance. Samuel will lead, I'll bring up the rear. What about your home? Hannah asked softly. Everything you've built here. Ethan looked around the kitchen at the house he'd shared with Margaret, where he'd expected to raise children of his own. But those dreams had died with her. New ones had taken their place. It's just a house, he said finally. What matters is in this room right now. Hannah's eyes glistened, but she nodded, understanding. They saddled 3 horses, one for Samuel, one for Ethan, and one for Hannah with Sarah. William would ride double with Ethan. The boy's face lit with pride when Ethan explained this arrangement, though the seriousness of their situation quickly sobered him again. As they prepared to leave, Ethan took a final look at the ranch house. Despite his words to Hannah, leaving felt like tearing away a piece of himself. This land had been his anchor after the war, after Margaret's death. Abandoning it, even temporarily, cut deeply. But as William's small arms wrapped around his waist once they were mounted, Ethan knew he'd made the right choice. Land could be reclaimed. Lives could not. They set off in single file, Samuel leading the way, Hannah and Sarah following, Ethan and William bringing up the rear. The morning had brightened slightly, though heavy clouds still threatened snow. Their breath clouded before them as they rode, the only sound the crunch of hooves through crusted snow and the occasional snort from the horses. The north pasture gave way to dense pine forest, the trapper's trail barely visible as a slight depression between the trees. Here, the snow was shallower, caught in the branches above rather than piling on the ground. But the going was still treacherous, the path narrow and often blocked by fallen timber that required detours. They rode in silence, ears straining for any sound of pursuit. Ethan checked their back trail frequently, though the forest was thick enough that riders could be quite close before being spotted. The children, sensing the gravity of their situation, remained quiet, Sarah occasionally whimpering softly when the trail grew particularly rough. By mid-morning, they'd covered perhaps 3 miles, slower progress than Ethan had hoped, but respectable given the conditions. The trail began to climb more steeply as they approached the ridge that separated Ethan's valley from Thompson's land beyond. Here, the forest thinned, exposing them more but offering a vantage point to check their back trail. Ethan called a brief halt, dismounting to scan the forest behind them with his spyglass. At first, he saw nothing but unbroken white and dark green. Then a flicker of movement caught his eye, riders, at least 4, moving steadily along their trail. Tate found us, he informed the others grimly. We need to move faster. The trail gets worse from here, Samuel warned. Narrow ledges, steep drops. No choice, Ethan replied. They're gaining on us. They pushed on, the trail now little more than a ledge cut into the side of the ridge. To their right rose a steep cliff face. To their left, a drop of several hundred feet into a rocky ravine. The horses picked their way carefully. Sensing the danger, William's arms tightened around Ethan's waist, the boy's face pressed against his back. You're doing fine, Ethan assured him. Just hold on. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The crack of branches, the distant call of men's voices. Tate and his deputies were closing the gap, likely riding harder and taking risks Ethan wouldn't with children in his care. The path narrowed further, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses single file. Hannah carried Sarah, the little girl's face buried in her mother's shoulder. The wind had picked up, driving snow horizontally across the exposed ridgeline. How much farther? Hannah called over the wind. Another mile to the summit, Samuel answered, then down the other side to Thompson's place. A gunshot echoed behind them, the bullet whining off rock well above their heads. A warning, not a serious attempt to hit them. Ethan pushed William toward Hannah. Keep going, he ordered. I'll hold them off. Ethan, no, Hannah protested. We don't have a choice, he said firmly. I'll catch up. Samuel, get them to the summit, then down to Thompson's. Samuel nodded grimly, taking William's hand. This way, boy, stay close. Ethan watched them continue along the narrow path, then positioned himself behind a boulder overlooking the trail below. From here, he had a clear view of the approach. He chambered around in his Winchester, steadying the rifle against the rock. The first rider appeared around a bend in the trail, rifle in hand, not Tate but one of his deputies, a young man Ethan recognized as Tim Harker, son of the local tanner. Behind him came three more men spread out along the trail. No sign yet of Tate himself. Ethan aimed carefully, then fired a shot that struck the ground directly in front of Harker's horse. The animal reared in panic, nearly throwing its rider. The other deputies pulled up short, scanning the ridge for the shooter. "That's far enough," Ethan called down. "Next shot won't miss." "Calloway!" It was Harker's voice. "We're here on official business. Sheriff Tate has a warrant for Hannah Whitaker's arrest." "On what charge?" Ethan demanded. "Conspiracy in the embezzlement of railroad funds," came the reply. "And for you, harboring a fugitive and interfering with an officer of the law." "Those charges are false, and you know it," Ethan shouted back. "Pierce is using you to cover up his own crimes." "That's not for us to decide," Harker called. "Come down peaceful-like, and no one needs to get hurt." "Not going to happen," Ethan replied. "Go back to town. Tell Pierce if he wants us, he'll have to come himself." "Don't make this worse, Calloway," another deputy warned. "There are 6 of us all together. Tate and the others are right behind us." 6 against 1, not good odds, especially when Ethan couldn't risk leaving his position for long. Hannah and the children needed more time to reach the summit and begin the descent to Thompson's place. "I'm giving you one chance to leave," Ethan called. "After that, I start shooting for real." The deputies conferred briefly, then Harker spoke again. "You're only delaying the inevitable, Calloway. We'll go around, come at you from both sides." Ethan had anticipated this. The trail was the only feasible route up the ridge, especially with horses. Going around would take them hours if they could manage it at all in this terrain and weather. "You're welcome to try," he replied. The deputies retreated back down the trail, disappearing around the bend. Ethan waited, watching for any sign of movement, but they seemed to have withdrawn, at least temporarily. He used the opportunity to move to a higher position, one that offered a better view of the trail and surrounding slopes. From his new vantage point, he could see Hannah and Samuel leading the children along the ridgeline, approaching the summit. They'd made good progress in the time he'd bought them. If they could reach the top and start down the other side before Tate regrouped, they might have a chance. The distinctive crack of a rifle split the air, and snow exploded near Ethan's head. He ducked instinctively, then rolled to a new position behind a fallen tree. Another shot followed, splintering bark inches from his face. They'd found him. Scanning the slopes below, he spotted a deputy working his way upward through the trees, using the cover to approach Ethan's position. Farther back, another man moved into position for a crossfire. They were better organized than Ethan had expected. He fired a shot toward the closer deputy, not aiming to hit, but to force him to keep his head down. Then he scrambled to a new position, staying low to avoid presenting a target. The game of cat and mouse continued for several minutes, each side firing and moving, neither gaining a clear advantage. But time was on Ethan's side. Every minute he kept the deputies pinned down was another minute for Hannah and the others to widen their lead. As long as he could maintain this standoff without getting himself killed, they had a chance. A movement to his left caught his attention. Sheriff Tate himself, approaching cautiously through the trees. Rifle ready. The man was an experienced hunter and tracker, more dangerous than his deputies. Ethan shifted his attention, firing a shot that sent Tate diving for cover. "Calloway," Tate shouted, "this has gone far enough. Throw down your weapon, or I'll have my men storm your position." "You'll lose men if you try," Ethan warned. "Maybe," Tate acknowledged, "but you'll definitely lose. And what happens to the Whitaker woman and her children then? Think about it." The threat hung in the air, deliberate and calculated. Ethan knew Tate was right. Eventually, they would overwhelm him by sheer numbers. But surrender meant certain separation from Hannah and the children, and likely worse once Pierce had them all in custody. A sudden commotion below drew his attention. New riders were approaching from the direction of town, moving quickly up the trail. Reinforcements for Tate, Ethan assumed grimly. His odds were getting worse by the minute. But as the newcomers came into view, Ethan realized they weren't deputies at all. The lead rider was James Cooper, still in his blacksmith disguise, and behind him rode 4 men wearing the distinctive badges of U.S. Marshals. "Sheriff Tate!" The call came from a tall, broad-shouldered man who appeared to be in charge of the marshals. "This is Deputy Marshal Thomas Reed. Stand down and recall your men immediately." Confusion crossed Tate's face. "What the hell is this, Reed? We're executing a lawful warrant." "Not anymore," Reed replied. "I have orders from the territorial governor to assume jurisdiction in this matter. All local warrants are suspended pending federal investigation." Tate didn't lower his weapon. "On what grounds?" "Allegations of judicial misconduct and corruption," Reed answered. "Now stand down, Sheriff. That's a federal order." For a tense moment, Ethan thought Tate might resist. The sheriff's grip on his rifle tightened, his face flushing with anger. Then slowly he lowered the weapon. "This isn't over," Tate growled. "Pierce won't stand for federal interference in local matters." "Judge Pierce is welcome to file a formal protest," Reed replied coolly, "after he addresses the charges against him." Tate signaled his deputies, who emerged reluctantly from their positions, weapons lowered but not holstered. The tension in the air remained palpable as Reed and his marshals moved between them and Ethan. James broke away from the group, climbing quickly to Ethan's position. "Hannah and the children?" he asked urgently. "On their way to the summit with Samuel," Ethan replied, relief making his voice unsteady. "How did you manage this?" "Reed was closer than we thought," James explained. "Already on his way to Timber Creek based on my earlier messages. I intercepted him just outside town." "And Pierce?" "Under house arrest," James confirmed. "The marshals seized all court documents and records from his office. They also found something interesting at his home." "What?" "A strong box containing items taken from Daniel's body, including a journal dating back to Missouri. It details Pierce's involvement in border raids during the Kansas-Missouri conflicts." James's expression was grim. "Murder, theft, worse. The journal lists 23 victims by name, mostly abolitionists and free black settlers. There are dates, locations, even how they died. Pierce and Tate were leaders of a gang that called themselves the Regulators, border ruffians who terrorized anti-slavery settlements. That's what Daniel discovered," Ethan realized. "He must have found this information in territorial archives while researching Pierce's past, the proof he was bringing to Hannah." "Exactly. Daniel worked for the Historical Society in Helena. He had access to old military and territorial records. When he connected Pierce's name to the border wars, he started digging," James explained. "And why Pierce was so desperate to silence him. The land fraud would cost Pierce money and reputation. But this?" He shook his head. "Pierce will hang for what's in that journal. There's no statute of limitations on murder." Reed approached, his stern face softening slightly as he introduced himself to Ethan. "Cooper tells me we have you to thank for preserving critical evidence in this case." "Hannah Whitaker deserves the credit," Ethan corrected. "She kept her husband's report hidden all this time." "We'll need her testimony," Reed acknowledged. "And yours. But first, let's get your family safely back to town." Family. The word struck Ethan with unexpected force. Yes, that's what they had become. He and Hannah and the children. A family, forged in crisis but no less real for it. "I need to let them know it's safe," Ethan said, already moving toward the summit trail. "They'll be halfway to Thompson's place by now." Reed assigned 2 marshals to accompany him, while the others remained to ensure Tate and his deputies returned to town without incident. Ethan rode hard, pushing his horse as much as he dared on the treacherous trail. At the summit, he found fresh tracks heading down the western slope, confirming Hannah and Samuel had continued as planned. He followed, the marshals struggling to keep pace as the trail descended steeply through dense forest. An hour later, they emerged into a small clearing where the Thompson homestead stood, smoke rising from its chimney against the gray sky. Outside the cabin, Samuel Cooper stood watch, rifle ready. He lowered it when he recognized Ethan. "Inside," he said simply. "Safe." Ethan dismounted, legs unsteady after the hard ride. The cabin door opened before he reached it, and Hannah stood framed in the doorway, relief washing over her face. "Ethan," she breathed, rushing to him. "We heard gunshots. I thought—" He enfolded her in his arms. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "Pierce is in custody. We're safe." She pulled back, searching his face. "Truly?" "Federal marshals," he confirmed, nodding toward the men who'd accompanied him. "They've suspended all local authority in Timber Creek pending an investigation." Inside the cabin, William and Sarah sat at a rough wooden table, mugs of hot chocolate before them, courtesy of Martha Thompson, Jim's wife. The children's faces lit up when they saw Ethan. "You came back!" Sarah exclaimed, running to him. He scooped her up, feeling her small arms lock around his neck. "Of course I did," he replied. "I promised, didn't I?" William approached more solemnly, but Ethan could see the relief in the boy's eyes. He reached out, ruffling William's hair. "You did well today. Protected your mother and sister, just like I asked." Pride straightened the boy's shoulders. "Does this mean we can go home now?" Home. Such a simple word, but so complicated in this moment. Ethan looked to Hannah, the question passing silently between them. Which home? His ranch? Her cabin in town? Neither seemed quite right anymore. We have some things to take care of in town first, Ethan answered carefully. Then we'll decide about home. The ride back to Timber Creek was somber but peaceful. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke as they descended from the mountains, gentle snow falling around them, transforming the landscape into something clean and new. The children rode double with Hannah and Ethan, bundled against the cold but no longer afraid. As they approached the town limits, Ethan was struck by how ordinary everything appeared. People moved about their business as usual, smoke rose from chimneys, horses stood hitched outside the general store. Yet everything had changed fundamentally. Pierce's hold over the town was broken. The truth about Robert's death would come out. Justice, so long deferred, was finally within reach. Reed met them at the sheriff's office, where Tate sat sullenly behind bars, his badge confiscated. Pierce has been taken to Helena for arraignment, the marshal informed them. Harding, too. They'll stand trial before a federal judge. And the railroad? Ethan asked. Inspector Collins is reviewing Robert's report now, James said, joining them. He's ordered a complete suspension of construction, pending a full geological survey of the route. Hannah clutched the document case containing her husband's original survey. Robert was right all along. Yes, James confirmed, and his work will save countless lives. The inspector estimates a fully loaded train crossing that section would almost certainly have triggered a collapse. They gave their statements to Reed, a process that took hours but felt like a necessary unburdening. Sarah was spared formal questioning due to her age, but William insisted on telling what he knew, his young face serious as he described the day his father died. When they finally emerged, darkness had fallen. The snow had stopped, leaving the town blanketed in white that glowed silver in the moonlight. Samuel met them outside, his normally stoic face alight with satisfaction. They're saying Pierce will never return to Timber Creek, he reported. Town council's meeting tonight to discuss appointing a new judge and sheriff. Good, Ethan said. This place deserves a fresh start. As do you, Samuel observed, glancing between Ethan and Hannah. Both of you. Hannah's hand found Ethan's, fingers intertwining naturally now. We have some decisions to make, she acknowledged. Take your time, Samuel advised, but not too much. Life's shorter than we think. With that piece of wisdom, he bid them good night, heading back to his shop where James was staying until they returned to Helena. Where will we sleep tonight? William asked practically. Ethan considered. His ranch was too far to reach before full dark, and Hannah's cabin had been abandoned for weeks now, likely cold and unwelcoming. The hotel has rooms available, Hannah suggested, just for tonight. The Golden Spike Hotel welcomed them warmly, the proprietor Thomas Jenkins having already heard of their ordeal. He offered their best suite at no charge, for what you've done for this town, as he put it. The children fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the day's events. Hannah tucked them in, then joined Ethan by the window overlooking the main street. It doesn't feel real yet, she said softly, that it's over. It will take time, Ethan acknowledged, for all of us. She leaned against him and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. What happens now, she asked. With us, I mean. Ethan had been pondering this question all day. In the space of a few weeks, his solitary existence had been utterly transformed. He'd found a purpose beyond mere survival, a family to protect, a woman to love. There was really only one path forward that made any sense. I think, he said carefully, that we should make official what's already true in every way that matters. Hannah looked up at him, which is? That we belong together. You, me, the children. He turned to face her fully. Hannah Whitaker, will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. He kissed her then, sealing the promise between them. Outside, the town slept under its blanket of snow, the troubles of recent weeks temporarily forgotten. Tomorrow would bring challenges of its own, rebuilding, healing, creating something new from the broken pieces of their separate pasts. But tonight, in this quiet moment, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he had found his way home at last, not to a place, but to the people who had claimed his heart when he thought it beyond repair. 3 months later, spring came early to Timber Creek. The snow melted, revealing green shoots pushing through the soil, nature's promise of renewal. The town itself had undergone a transformation no less profound. With Pierce and his allies gone, people walked taller, spoke more freely. Samuel Cooper had been elected to the town council. The new judge, a stern but fair man from Helena, had declared all of Pierce's rulings subject to review. On the Callaway Ranch, Now officially the Callaway Whitaker Ranch by deed, the old house had been expanded. 2 new rooms added, the porch widened to catch the afternoon sun. The sound of children's laughter echoed across fields being prepared for planting. Ethan stood on that porch, watching William help the new stable hand with the horses. The boy had grown an inch already, his shoulders straightening with new confidence. Sarah sat nearby, drawing in a book Mabel Foster had given her nightmares gradually fading with time and safety. Hannah emerged from the house, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. She carried Robert's pocket watch chain, now joined with the watch itself, recovered when Pierce's possessions were seized. She had polished both to a high shine. "For William when he's older," she said, leaning against Ethan's shoulder, a reminder of where he came from. Ethan nodded, slipping an arm around her waist. His wedding ring caught the sunlight. Simple, new, unlike the one he'd worn before. Different, as this marriage was different, built on truth and choice rather than youthful dreams. "The inspector says they'll reroute the railroad track around the unstable section," he told her. "They're naming it Whitaker's Crossing on the official maps." Hannah smiled, tears shining briefly before she blinked them away. He would have liked that. A wagon appeared on the horizon, James Cooper making his monthly visit from Helena. He'd bring news, supplies, perhaps letters from the east. The world was opening up to them again. "I was thinking," Ethan said, "about adding another room. For the future." Hannah's hand moved unconsciously to her middle, a small smile playing at her lips. "I think that's a fine idea." The foundation had been laid. The rest they would build together one day at a time.